Hello, aspiring hunters. Welcome to the Hunter Experience. The possibility of a confrontation between the Phantom Troupe and Maruem with his royal guards is an incredible exercise for analyzing strategies within the Hunter x Hunter universe. I believe this clash would represent much more than just an exchange of blows. It would be a collision of philosophies, tactics, and radically different worldviews. To understand how this encounter could unfold, we need to thoroughly examine the capabilities of each group, their internal dynamics, and how their specific abilities could interact in an imagined battlefield. If you're prepared for the incredible Hunter journey, click like and subscribe to the channel to join our troop. Don't forget to comment on who your favorite character is in Hunter x Hunter. Now, let's continue with this incredible story. Since the York New arc, we have seen the Phantom Troupe operate as a cohesive unit, where each member complements the abilities of the others in an almost symbiotic manner. Crollo Lusilfer, with his strategic intelligence and ability to steal Nen abilities, would naturally be the mastermind behind the operation against threats of Meruem's caliber. However, I think even his tactical genius would face unprecedented challenges when confronting creatures whose sheer power far surpasses any opponent the troupe has ever faced. The fundamental difference would lie in the very nature of the conflict. While the troupe specializes in asymmetric and psychological combat, Maruem and his royal guards represent the pinnacle of physical power and military efficiency in the known world. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of this analysis is how the troupe's specific abilities could be employed against enemies of such disproportionate strength. Phaeton, with his Pain Packer, could potentially inflict significant damage if he managed to survive long enough to accumulate injuries. However, I believe the speed and perception of the Royal Guards, especially Yuppie and P2, would make this scenario extremely unlikely. Yuppie's transformation, demonstrated during his fight against Morel and Knuckle, suggests that he could neutralize damage accumulation attacks before they became truly threatening. The dynamics between the troop members during battle would be another crucial factor. Von Lenoff, with his ability to create musical battlefields, could attempt to isolate one of the opponents, while Franklin would use his long-range firepower to create distractions. I think Machi, with her nearly undetectable aura threads, would try to set subtle traps, while Nobunaga would seek direct combat within his 1-meter range. However, would even this impressive coordination be enough against Meruem's keen perception, capable of analyzing fighting patterns and anticipating movements with frightening precision? Pakunoda's presence, if we consider a scenario where she was still alive, would add an interesting layer to the confrontation. Her ability to read memories could provide valuable information about the enemy's thought patterns. However, I believe even this cognitive advantage would have limitations against beings whose psychology differs so greatly from humans. Maruem, in particular, demonstrated a capacity for mental evolution that could quickly render any obtained information obsolete. Shizuku's ability, Demechan, could have interesting applications in combat, especially in removing bodily fluids or creating specific tactical situations. However, I think the Royal Guard's physical resilience would make this power less effective than in battles against humans. Similarly, Cortopi's ability to create copies could be useful for confusing opponents, but perhaps not against enemies whose senses are as sharp as Meruem's and his protectors. The battle environment would also be a determining factor. In an open space, the Royal Guards would have the advantage with their mobility and raw power. In a closed or urban environment, the troop could better exploit their ambush tactics and force division. I think Crollo would try to force a scenario where he could isolate opponents, perhaps using the teleportation ability he stole during the York New arc. However, the Royal Guard's reaction speed would make this strategy extremely difficult. The actual unfolding of a battle between the Phantom Troupe and Maruem with his Royal Guards would be less about victory and more about a demonstration of how different combat philosophies collide in a spectacle of strategy and brute force. I believe that although the outcome seems predictable, given the overwhelming power of the Chimera Ants, moments of direct confrontation would reveal fascinating nuances about each character and how their abilities complement or counteract one another. Crollo Lusilfer, as always, would try to turn the fight into a game of intelligence. His book, Bandit's Secret, would be the key to any remote possibility of success, but the question is, what abilities would he have stolen beforehand that could make a difference against beings like Maruem? Perhaps he would attempt to use illusion or mind control techniques, but I believe the psychological resilience of the Ant King, demonstrated in his interaction with Komugi, would render this ineffective. Against Pitao, however, whose loyalty is absolute, but whose perception can be manipulated, Crollo might attempt a more subtle approach, using distractions or mental traps. Phaeton and Nobunaga, the troupe's direct combat specialists, would likely face Yuppie in a clash of pure carnage. Yuppie, with his transformation and regeneration abilities, is an opponent who neither tires nor retreats. Phaeton might attempt to activate his Pain Packer, but I think Yuppie with his explosive nature, would hardly allow him to accumulate enough damage to unleash Rising Sun. Nobunaga, on the other hand, with his precise swordsmanship, would be crushed by the difference in physical strength. His refined technique would mean little against a monster that can alter its own biology instantly. P2, in turn, would be a singular problem. Her speed and her end-covering kilometers would make her a relentless hunter. Machi and Shalnark would try to use traps and remote control, but P2's Terpsichore is an almost perfect ability for agile combat. Could Shalnark manage to use his black voice on her? I don't think so. His needle would have to pierce a creature whose body is tougher than steel, and even if he succeeded, would mind control work on a chimera ant with such an alien mind? The true silent threat would be Pouf. His body, capable of dividing into microscopic cells, and his ability to manipulate emotions make him the most dangerous opponent on a psychological level. He could infiltrate the Troupe's ranks, sowing discord and paranoia, exploiting their loyalties and fears. Franklin, with his long-range attacks, would try to keep him at bay, but Pouf is a master at avoiding direct confrontations when they do not suit him. Perhaps Bonolenov, with his battle Cantabile, could create a space where Pouf couldn't fragment himself, but it would be an endurance battle that the Troupe has no way of winning. And what about Maruem? He probably wouldn't even fully engage at the start. Just like he did against Netero, he would analyze and study his opponents, letting the Royal Guards handle most of the fight. But when he decided to act, it would be quick and decisive. Krollo would try to deceive him with multiple stolen abilities, but Maruem learns and adapts in real time. I think at best the Troupe could force him to take the fight seriously for a few minutes before being completely overwhelmed. In the end, what would remain wouldn't be a victory, but a lesson. The Phantom Troupe is lethal against humans, but against beings that transcend common biology, they would be fighting against nature itself. Perhaps some members would survive by fleeing Finks, and Kaluto, for example, have abilities that allow for quick retreats. But in a direct and prolonged confrontation, the power gap is simply insurmountable. The real tragedy would be the emotional impact. The Troupe is a family, and watching its members be eliminated one by one would shatter its balance. Krollo, as cold as he is, isn't insensitive, and Maruem has no reason to show mercy. In the end, this hypothetical battle would prove that in the world of Hunter x Hunter, there are monsters that even the most skilled thieves cannot steal from or deceive. Perhaps the most decisive factor in this hypothetical fight is the fundamental difference in the origin of power. While the members of the Phantom Troupe developed their abilities through years of experience and refinement, Maruem and his guards were born with capabilities that defy the limits of what is possible in the human world. I believe this disparity in the foundation of power would make any strategy the Troupe comes up with insufficient unless they could exploit some psychological or emotional vulnerability in their opponents. Maruem, in particular, represents an almost insurmountable challenge. His evolution throughout the Chimera Ant arc showed that he not only possessed overwhelming physical power, but also an unprecedented ability to learn and adapt. Who knows if even Krollo's strategic genius could develop a plan that accounted for all the variables Maruem represents. The battle against Netero demonstrated that the Chimera Ant King was capable of overcoming even the most refined and powerful techniques of one of the greatest hunters in history. And despite all the creativity, coordination, and unique abilities of the Phantom Troupe, I believe the victory in this hypothetical confrontation would undeniably belong to Maruem and his royal guards. The power difference isn't just numerical or technical, it's existential. The Chimera Ants represent a threat that transcends the scope of what humans, even the most talented ones like the Troupe members, can realistically face. Maruem alone is already an almost unstoppable force. His speed, strategic intelligence, and ability to evolve mid-battle make him an opponent that cannot be defeated by conventional means. Netero, the strongest hunter of his era, only managed to injure him by sacrificing everything, and even then, it wasn't enough to truly take him down. The Troupe, as well coordinated as they are, does not have a resource equivalent to Zero Hand. Krollo is a tactical genius, but none of the abilities he could have stolen compared to the raw power and adaptability of the King Hunters. That was our video for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed our video, subscribe to the channel as it is still very new, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then.